What's going on, Soul Tribe? And welcome to Alchemist Astrology. Justin here, and are you ready to get into the Celestial News Monthly? Because if I had to describe March, it's if January and February had a baby, that would be March. It's got the eclipsy eyes of February because we got an eclipse that's happening at the beginning of the month. What I do like, it has all the aspects that January was bringing, and we definitely got some planetary ingresses that are going to be going on. But what I do really like about March is that Jupiter is going to be stationing direct alongside Mercury too, but especially that Jupiter. And I think what's really going to come into play here is how much can Jupiter kind of clean up with everything that has been happening. What does that relief from all bad things that Jupiter promises? How do we have faith in this new chapter that we're in with this new book that we're in with Saturn entering into Aries and all of these things unfolding? So we got a lot to unpack on this one here. But before we jump into that, if you're new here, again, my name is Justin. And one of the things that I do here is, like I said, talk about the Celestial News Monthly, which gets into the activity of the sun and the other planets and talks about what signs that they're entering when the planets happen to go retrograde, when there are eclipses, when there are and all of the things just that as these different aspects that, again, like that they're forming in how to navigate this in your own chart. And we even get into we're going to talk about some astronomical things as well, because I mean, if it wasn't for all of those planets up there, we'd have nothing to talk about here. So we got to get a visual on that as well. Now, if you want to support the work that I'm doing further, down in the description box, there's a link for my Patreon page, and I have two tiers on there. One of them giving you access to the first tier gives you access to the Lucky Day podcast, which is a monthly show that talks about the most auspicious dates for each month for whatever endeavor that you're wanting to initiate there. So that's one thing, and then the other one includes that plus a personalized monthly transit report from me. So if that's something that you find yourself interested in, definitely go check that out. But let's go ahead and get into this thing here. Now, before I jump into the individual slides, I wanted to get just a visual of the month, just a lay of the land on the calendar here so we can see what's going on. And as you can see, this is a lot busier than what February was bringing. Now, we kick it off here. Here's Mars. And we're kicking it off with Mars. I put Mars up here just because that's where the sun's going to be entering in the house of Mars here soon. But first, we start off with Mars entering into Pisces on the 2nd. We have a total lunar eclipse that's going to be happening on the 3rd, which we're going to be able to. I'll talk a bit more about that one on my other channel, but I'll talk about that here in a minute. We've got this nice harmonious aspect here with the sun and Jupiter. Venus enters into Aries on the 6th, and that Jupiter-Sun trine is going to happen on the 5th. Then we have a Sun-Mercury conjunction that's going to be happening on the 7th. On the 8th is kind of a busier day. We have Venus forming a conjunction with Saturn shortly after it enters. And then we have this another little harmonious aspect here, an easier aspect between both these retrograde planets here, Mercury and Jupiter. Big Papa stationing direct on the 10th. Love that. Then we have our, now we're starting to wrap up this series of Mars Mercury conjunctions that we've been having for a while here. We'll definitely talk about that on the 15th. On the 18th, we got the benefics meeting up there for a square on the 18th. Then we have, for a square, let me rephrase that. We have Venus and Jupiter forming a square with one another on the 18th. Then on the 20th, got the sun moving into the sign of its exaltation. It's Aries season. Then we have Mercury stationed direct on the same day, which I really like that too. Then on the 21st, Jupiter's taking care of some of Mars shenanigans here with forming a trine. Got a little bit more of a serious note here on the 25th with the sun forming a conjunction with Saturn. And then to wrap up, we get some loveliness in the mix. Venus is going to enter its home of Taurus after that little trek through Aries, and Venus is moving. Venus is booking it. But now that we got a feel for that, let's go ahead and break these ingresses and all these aspects and stations down one at a time here. Now, when we get to the 2nd of March, that's when Mars is going to enter into Pisces. Now, what you want to do whenever you have a planet that enters into a new portion of your, or just a new portion of your chart, you want to see one, what is, how to, is one, is Pisces a house that's activated for you for the year? Is Mars a time lord for you for the year? How is it aspecting your chart, especially when you're looking at if you have planets in Pisces, Gemini, Virgo, or Sagittarius, because those are going to be the places that are conjunct, square, or in opposition to that, to Mars here. So you want to pay attention to that to see how that's going to relate. To give you an example, I have my moon at 0 degrees of Gemini. My moon is that house of Gemini is activated for me for that year. So I'm watching things that are coming, especially, and that's especially too if you have a day chart. We want to watch what the hell Mars is doing, because especially if it's forming a hard aspect, because those tend to be just can be more challenging aspects, whereas versus a night chart, this could be a more kind of motivating time where Mars is still bringing some challenges, especially if it's squaring or any of those hard aspects. It's more surmountable challenges in the night chart. So that's another thing, like this chart here would be in a night chart. So you've got an Aquarius rising, Mars is entering into your money house of Pisces, and I'm working with whole sign here. So you got to pay attention to, if you're using like Placidus or whatever you happen to use, to see what house or houses that are places that Pisces spans over. So that's something to tune into as well. So that's a lot of things to consider there, but that's a Mars is bringing energy there. It's bringing some action. It's bringing that sense of, maybe can bring some irritations. Maybe there's something here if we're talking with, let's say, but we're working with Aquarius risings. Maybe there's something that's coming up with your finances. This could be thinking about, how do I want to make more? How do I want to improve? Maybe I want to get a promotion. Maybe I need to promote my services more actively, something along those lines. Maybe I need to think about how I'm investing possibly here. So that's something could be something, just as an example here, to think about when you're looking at your own chart. But when you think about it in general here, Mars doesn't have any real dignity or debility in Pisces in general. Pisces is the house of Jupiter. So it's nice that at least Mars is in a harmonious aspect with its house ruler there, can get the resources that it needs from Jupiter here. So that's at least some positive things that's kind of supporting Mars in this. Venus is kind of there for at least a little bit of Mars's trek, kind of early trek in there. But something I wanted to kind of bring to your attention too as we move throughout this month, Mars is slowly getting out from under the beams. It's still got another about 3 degrees or so before we'll be able to see Mars rising. I'm actually kind of looking forward to that question mark. The last time I saw Mars in the sky was when around the time that I moved here. In Mars, I will say the first feeling I remember seeing Mars, I was like a little startled, because you see this just red dot in the sky, this red star in the sky. It's something else. So that's something, if you're able to get a view of the eastern horizon, to go check that out, because that gives you can see, it creates a different type of relationship with the celestial bodies. It's really quite fascinating when you have that connection, kind of watching them as they're moving throughout the sky. So that's something to pay attention to, that Mars is going to be those themes will be more, they won't be under the beams of the sun, so they won't be as hidden anymore. Those martial themes will kind of be sort of front and center. So that's another thing, to kind of think about there, just kind of astronomically with that. But when I think of just Mars and Pisces, that gives me this almost like swimmer's analogy, where you're in the strength that it takes to swim. And sometimes I think at how as it can be tricky when you're swimming, or at least I imagine that when you need to take a rest, you're still you have to be in some sort of motion, or maybe you have to, you know what I mean? There's something I feel like you have to, engaging with water, I'm awkward with it, but that's interesting, trying to stay relaxed in that Piscean sea, where Mars, I think, it has maybe a hard time in Cancer, but it rules the house of Scorpio. So when I think Mars is focused, it can manage this stuff well. So, but I feel like it's a learning to go with the flow with Mars in Pisces, to kind of feel that one, I think the blood pumping in one's veins, the things that kind of push the body, but paying attention to like when how those energy levels do change when you have an abundance of it, but when there's a maybe a lack there of it, and also what I think excites one, what really gets the feelings churning, what are you passionate about? I can see this as a Pisces being traditionally a Jupiterian ruled sign, I think wants to bring that sense of joy for others, wants to help, doesn't want to see people suffer, wants to see those having a good time, wants to help you move. Because I think Pisces, similar to Cancer, into a degree, Scorpio knows that you have to move through those emotions, and you can learn a lot from the emotions there. This can create this strong spiritual kind of Gnostic connection there. So I think that can be a real kind of powerful placement for Mars. My stepdad has that natally. He's the great artist, and I think that that's another really great one to see how different themes get the body moving, how that can how how music, for example, can get one motivated, how a certain maybe seeing a certain piece of artwork can inspire one to change. Maybe you see a color scheme that you hadn't seen before, and that inspires you to change your home space or whatever that happens to be. It's very abstract, and there's a lot of attention here in that Pisces portion of our charts right now. So it's something to just kind of tune in with that Mars entering there. Now we get to the 3rd of March, and then we get into the lunar eclipse, and that's going to have a total lunar eclipse that's going to happen at about 12 degrees and 53 minutes of Virgo. And if you're looking at the video version here, I have a chart up of these placements. And with this, the eclipses, this is going to be happening wherever you have Virgo in your chart. This happened on that Pisces Virgo axis. So let's say, for example, in this one here, there could be something that's coming in this. So we're talking about Capricorn rising. This could be something where lunar eclipses, where you think about the solar ones, can bring about these new beginnings. Lunar eclipses, we're coming to a head here. We're reaching a culminating point. We're starting to see the thing at its fullest. So these usually represented, I like how Chris Brennan puts it, as like these sort of like maybe more kind of supercharged endings that maybe is happening. And so this could be, for example, maybe with that ninth house axis, dealing with both of them having education in common. Maybe you're coming up on getting ready to wrap up school at some time here soon. And so you're thinking about, what is that going to look like after the case? How do you take this profession onward? Where are you going to be traveling to? Maybe that's going to get you moving somewhere. Maybe a certain relationship ending, is ending, but it's just as things end, other things begin as well. And so this could be making the space for something. And I talk about this a lot more on, and I'm just going to just kind of again go into this briefly. I talk about this more on the lunar shenanigans. So if you want to check that out, down in the description box, there's a playlist tab for all the lunar shenanigans. You can go to the week of this one to be the week, because that's happened on a Tuesday. The videos, it'll come out on the 2nd of March. That's when I'll have that video out. So that's something to tune into there. But yeah, that's basically the eclipses. And then this energy will be sort of phasing out there until we get into the next lunation that'll happen and when we get into Pisces there. Or when the moon gets into Pisces in a couple of weeks. So yeah, but that's the lunar eclipse. Those are going to be what's activated there. Wherever you have that, whatever house or houses that have that Virgo Pisces in your chart. Now, when we get to the 5th of March, we got this harmonious aspect here. We got the sun forming a trine with Big Papa, and that's happening at exactly about 15 degrees and 8 minutes of Pisces and Cancer for Jupiter. And when you think about the sun and Jupiter trining one another, the trine is when the celestial bodies are 120 degrees apart from each other. So usually in like elements, when we're thinking about that, both of them being Cancer and Pisces being water signs here. And the trine is considered the most positive aspect. It's an easy aspect. And so this could be, for example, just really feeling good in oneself, having that sense of motivation, not feeling those impediments. Like I can take on the world right now. Yeah, I can do this, whatever that it is. This, and think about how those that maybe that Pisces and Jupiter houses relate to one another when you're seeing this come up for you. But this to me, this gives even a good combination for forming relationships with people, thinking about how Jupiter can bring about friends with great, and even the sun representing friendship. This could be forming some sort of like networking, possibly doing some sort of like group activity. Jupiter representing that brotherhood, in a sense, that bringing of people. Jupiter's that aspect of love and desire. It brings about begets children. So there's this life-giving energy with Jupiter. This could be a great thing for, especially in water energy, to give those things you're feeling, those changes that you're wanting life to get that ball rolling, whatever that happens to look like for you. But this is a really nice aspect. You know, something I think to think about too, whenever the sun happens to be a time lord or whatever that's, or for paying attention to trines with Jupiter. See how that feels when that's happening natally in your chart, whenever the time lord happens to be transiting Jupiter, whenever whatever that trine happens to be, and seeing how those moments of ease can be. I find the time to really I know the squares and the oppositions can be the more sort of energizing times to make things happen. But I like to think even to do things during the trine when things are, it's easy to do stuff when time is easy. It's easy, yeah, but it could be nice to just wanting to kind of kick back and just be in the good feels and all that. But let's take that energy and do something with it, because it's going to be a little bit harder to do that when there are more squares and oppositions and potentially conjunctions that are happening depending on who's involved. So I like this combination here. Again, a very, I think, a nice motivational little pocket there, and this could be maybe even someone offering some relief there. That idea of Jupiter bringing that goodness, that relief from all bondage and things like along those lines there. So bringing that sense of faith that Jupiter brings there. So I like this aspect for sure. Now we get to the sixth here, and then we get Venus moving into Aries. And this is an interesting one here, because when we, again, now we're looking at the, just like when we did with Mars, we're looking at the Aries portion of our chart now here. And now another little astronomical note here to mention, Venus is, like I said, Venus is starting to book it here. Venus is going to go through here, and it'll be out of Aries by the end of the month. And Venus now will be able to be seen in the western horizon. So if you have a view of that, you can see Venus setting, and Venus is spectacular. I need to find a spot for to watch things set. But Venus in the sky is a sight, and actually it's something to think about too. Since it's getting so, when we look at the lay of the land here, Venus is going to run. Venus has just opened the door into Aries, and Saturn is hanging up its coat and get ready to take off his shoes here. So it's just like, oh, this is Saturn. I didn't expect you to be here. Why are you here? And we're going to talk more about that conversation here in a bit. But this is going to be the time where here in a little bit we won't be able to see Saturn anymore. Saturn's going to go under the beams of the sun, and that's going to be, I think, interesting in itself to see what are some Saturnian things the things that are happening in the long run that maybe we can't see, where there may be secrets afoot when we think about with Saturn and stuff along those lines. So that's just something to think about astronomically and kind of astrologically there. But when you think about Venus in Aries, this is a trickier place for Venus. It's not like quite like when it's in its fall here of Virgo, but it is where Venus finds itself in its one way you can think about it is in its exile or in its detriment. And it's like you're being in your furthest home away from home, even though Taurus is the next sign in after Aries. Venus can see its homeland of Libra, and it's so far away where things work differently for Venus, where things work in its favor, but now it's under the rule of Mars, one of the malefics, and it's co-present with Saturn with this as well. There's Jupiter's able to witness this whole thing, but this is a trickier place for Venus for sure. And you can think about this one with Venus entering into Aries. On a positive note, it's Venus bringing some, because especially if you have maybe a night chart and maybe this Saturn in Aries is it hasn't been feeling the most comfortable so far. Venus is trying to bring some ease into that, especially for night charts, and he's still bringing some sweetness in for the day charts too as well. I got Venus going through. Venus is one of the time lords for me, and it's going to be aspecting on my Leo placements. My moon is going to be lovely. Square my sun, which is meh, but that's when it's Venus. It's Venus, so it's fine. And so that's something that could be wherever this happens to you, however this be relating to you. Maybe this is going through your fifth house, so this could be maybe doing something with hanging out with your kids possibly, or maybe thinking about the idea of children. Maybe something, or pregnancy happens to come up. Fifth house can deal with like friendships, so this could be making more time for some friends, being forward. Venus is in a fire sign now of Aries. Aries is the cardinal fire signs ruled by Mars, one of the diurnal signs. So you can see how this can maybe be a little uncomfortable for Venus. And in Libra, Venus, it's the whole game of the conversation, the back and the forth, the banter. Whereas Venus here is just more forward, like, no, let me just go for this thing. Let me just go get what I want. This is, like it's a little different with Venus. Again, more forward with Venus, which I don't think entirely is a bad thing. Venus is more passionate, but it's when maybe those passions overcome oneself that Venus maybe it's the fires can maybe be a bit much for Venus sometimes. So that could be something where you're noticing maybe just more livelier conversations, maybe more activities. Maybe possibly Venus was associated with like the markets and things. So maybe you're seeing more activities that's happening there, possibly something more innovative, something more yeah, just more just in your face about it. This is giving just that obscure art style that maybe seem a bit weird at first, but then people tend to fall in love with it. It's that sort of thing. So, and because when you have planets in like their detriment, I think it's not that they can't do it. It's just that it's operating a bit differently. So, but again, look to see how that relates to your chart. Especially going to be really nice for those if you have like, let's say like Leo placements, like I was talking about with I have a bunch of Leo placements, or even Sag placements, because that's going to be forming trines, and even to a lesser degree to like Aquarius and Gemini here, because that's going to be forming sextiles. But see how that relates in your chart. Pay attention to how Venus transits to that, and especially if you have, since we're talking from the cardinal placements now, we're talking from Aries, Cancer, Libra, or Capricorn. Those are going to be the more kind of active placements for that Venus will be activating for you. So let's move on to the 7th here, because then we get to we have Mercury is forming a conjunction with the Sun, and that's happening at 16 degrees and 52 minutes at about 3:01 a.m. Pacific time. I know I should probably be mentioning these times. Let me backtrack a little bit. Mars is going to be entering Pisces at about 6:15 a.m. Pacific time. That eclipse is happening at about 3:37 a.m. Pacific time. The Jupiter trine with the Sun, 9:13 a.m., and then Venus is going to enter into Aries at about 2:45 a.m. Everything's happening in the morning Pacific time here. It's all early. So just for your time zone with that one. But that Mercury conjunct the Sun here, let's get back on track. I'm glad I caught that early. That's going to be complete at about 3:01 a.m. Pacific time. And now we're about halfway through the retrograde, the Mercury's retrograde here. And we got about two more weeks roughly. About 13 days or so before Mercury's going to station direct here. And so we're halfway through this retrograde. Mercury's been going through the Pisces part of your chart, and this is that time of clarity where you think about Mercury is how we think, how we communicate. And this could be even an understanding when we're talking about in Pisces. This could be understanding more abstract things, maybe something that was a little foggy at first, since Mercury has a bit more trouble here. Speaking of planets in like their detriment, it's the sign of its detriment and its fall in Pisces. But the nice thing that this conjunction is happening within a degree of Big Papa, the ruler of Pisces. So to me, this is a very positive conjunction here. This could be maybe some good news that's coming up here. Some sort of reevaluation of something. Maybe when we think about the sun representing leaders, for example, that could be that hearing some sort of news that from that front, or maybe an authority of a sense, maybe like a boss, things like that. So that's something that can that's what I one thing I do kind of like about this conjunction with the sun. But that is happening really close with Jupiter. But as you can see, there's a lot of water in the mix right now. So I think another thing is to it's this understanding of where other people are coming from, but not just from their words, but on the feelings too. When we're thinking with that, because there's that intellectual component still with Mercury, but again, that Pisces influence is bringing that emotional, intuitive thing there. It's hmm. Maybe what I'm trying to put is that there's this understanding, maybe how one's words land and how words and things influence one. This could be see that clarity of seeing like, oh, maybe I was being, maybe that not necessarily manipulated, but how impressionable. I think we all can be at times for whatever reason. That it just depends on the circumstance where we can maybe tend to get a little caught up. And that's what this is giving me there. This being able to the sun being that light, Mercury being it's like the light in the fog or the light in the ocean, to be able to see some sort of direction here where these where things are potentially going. So just something to think about with that aspect there. Now, when we get to the 8th, this one is a bit of a busier day. This energy's been building up for a bit. First, we're going to have Venus is going to form a conjunction with Saturn. That's going to be exact at about 5:39 a.m. Pacific time. Now, the conjunctions, like I was saying, with like the Sun and the and Mercury, where these they're together in the on this either in the same on the same degree, and it's a fusion of energies. So you're taking those Venusian and those Saturnian themes, and so these relationships are taking on more of a Saturnian quality. And it's fascinating when you think about just Venus and Saturn in general, because in a night chart, Venus would be considered the most benefic planet, and Saturn would be considered the most malefic planet. So you already have these themes of extremes trying to come together, trying to reconcile here. And it's how do we, when you think about just relationships in itself, when you initiate relationships, that Aries energy, it's not just about that initiation and that's it, that it's just always going to be great. Relationships change over time, and you change over time, and it's how we put in the work for those relationships over time, whether it's relationships with people, relationships with our jobs, with our home, with our the place we with our bodies, with our finances, with our relatives, whatever that happens to be, wherever again where you happen to have that Aries sector of your chart, our marriage. It's this is an ever evolving thing, in that it's something that we have to nurture on the regular. It can't just be all good, but it can't be all hard either. There needs to be some sort of balance there. There are times where our friends are there for us for those great times, for those celebrations, those victories, and then other times where we want our friends to be there for us when we're hurting, when we're struggling. This gives me to considering that it's Saturn in the mix, it can think about maybe the secrets that we maybe keep in relationships. Saturn can be a very secretive sign that we say one thing, put on a face here, but then have a different maybe view of it when we're talking about it with someone else possibly, or whatever that happens to look like, and how we change and how we adapt to different people, and the things maybe again that we keep hidden, that we choose to not say. Maybe it is just to keep the peace, because why disturb the waters. Other times it's maybe there's some things that maybe need to be said that don't need to be secret anymore. And that's where I think I kind of like this combination, even though there's this more serious tone of this Venus Saturn conjunction. At the same day, Mercury and Jupiter are going to be forming a trine with one another. So again, this very easy aspect between the planet of communication and the planet of the good stuff, abundance, of life and love. And so this could be where, and they're both retrograde in this point, getting ready to station direct here soon. Jupiter here, we're going to talk about that literally next. And this could be where we may have some potentially, there could be some harder either conversations that need to be had, some maybe harder realizations that are be had, thinking about the things with Venus that we're devoted to. Venus could deal with this idea of purity and cleanliness, and it takes dedication to keep things clean, and keeping stuff that takes discipline. Saturn that comes into that. So thinking about the things that we're devoted to, kind of reflecting on that, and how do we continue to maintain that devotion? Is this something that do we want to stay devoted to this, and what is the best ways to go about it that is most amicable? Even I think if this was, let's say, for example, maybe relationships end, and it doesn't have to be like a marriage, it could be maybe a business contract, something going along those lines. Just because we may not be working together anymore, that doesn't mean that we have to be enemies per se. At least I don't personally think that, because there was love at one point, there was an agreement at one point. In life happens. Life does life things, and why carry that on? Why take that Mercury Jupiter, let's take the good. Let's take the good and see where we can where that's gonna open next. And I think too, with that Venus conjunct Saturn, it's who we're bringing in on this new chapter. Because outside of the moon, Venus is the first planet to form a conjunction with Saturn here, since it's been officially settled into Aries here. So we're all relating differently right now, and it's still very early. I say it just like in when this specific aspect happened, and it's still very early. Saturn's only at 2 degrees of Aries. We still got a couple years of this before we really kind of see. Time illuminates everything, but we do have to realize that we may not be able to see it all, and who are going to be those that we journey into the unknown with. So some interesting things I think that can come up there with the on the 8th there. But let's get out of that and talk about some good news. Jupiter's bringing the good news. And on the 10th of March, we got Big Papa that's going to be stationed in direct at 15 degrees and 5 minutes of Cancer, right on my Jupiter or my Sun placement. Love that. But this is actually where I want to say Jupiter is exactly, or they say the exact degree that Jupiter is exalted in Cancer is 15 degrees of Cancer. So there's even something auspicious in there. But it's nice to look at Big Papa and Jupiter not being the red anymore. Because Jupiter's time in Cancer, I think, has not been like we maybe had expected to be. You think with them, especially when you got Big Papa in a place where it's after its home signs, it's really raised up there. It's got, as you see, Saturn's back being a downer. It is overcoming square to Jupiter. So that's just going to be a thing in general. And it'll ease up once Jupiter enters into Leo. But then Jupiter doesn't technically have any real big dignity in Leo. So that's sort of a mixed bag there. So it's like it's a stronger Jupiter. We like whenever these planets are stationed. These are statements here. We want to really pay attention to what happens around the station period, within especially like a day or two, a day before, day after of the station, until Jupiter starts moving again. those station directs and retrograde points are usually something significant goes happens there. And so this could be just an understanding of just how much Jupiter can give. Where I am excited for Jupiter to be going direct in, because when it's retrograde, it indicates delays, but now Jupiter can give more regularly and give in this abundance. But it just made we may have to. There's still this kind of somber touch to it, and I think that comes from with Saturn being, even though it's not by degree, it's still by sign, that it's not going to be like if Jupiter didn't have Saturn here. It'd been better if Saturn was best if just Saturn was out of view of this. If Saturn was in like Aquarius, that would be fantastic. But it's going to have these series of squares that are going to be happening from Saturn, eventually from Mars. It's going to be happening. Mercury will meet into the mix while all of that's happening. There's going to be some interesting things that are going to be coming up there. Venus, thankfully, is coming up in there, which we'll talk about here in a moment. But again, this I don't want to downplay it, but I don't want to inflate it either. I think it's going to be one where, because one thing I will say that I've kind of liked, and that the benefics remind me about, is that sure there can be some madness that is going on in the world, but there's also some beautiful things that are going on in the world too. I just met some really great people. That's just a little small example. Things could be there are things that are going well. There are people that are, and it's not always distributed equally. It doesn't always come at those same periods of time. But Jupiter still brings that good. And it may be something that we have to take with us, and it may not be maybe as much as we want, but it's what we have, and that's still great. And we can still build with that. We can still give that life and try to make that grow as best we can. We work with the tools that we got, and I think that's what this Jupiter stationing direct is bringing out here. And with the stationing direct and Mercury still being kind of retrograde here, maybe that understanding is still kind of settling in there, but I like it. I like it. It's a I think a much needed some breath of fresh air for Jupiter to be in the water for Jupiter to be stationed direct for sure. Definitely love that. And pay attention too. That's happening exactly. I didn't mention the time. It's happening exactly at about 8:29 p.m. Pacific time. And I got the chart up here. And you want to pay attention too if you had any points. Like I said, I got the sun's right here for me in Cancer here. But if you got any points in Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, or Aries, Big Papa's is going to be moving again, especially for those with like mid to do pretty much the all the from 15 to the end of the degrees of Cancer. Jupiter's coming back your way, so just something to tune into if you're thinking about that. Where's the relief coming in? So, especially for you day chart people, love that Big Papa's moving. Now, when we get to the 15th, this is going to be one of the harder aspects, like that Jupiter, or excuse me, like that Venus Saturn conjunction. This is one of the harder aspects of the month. And we've been having a series of these for quite a while. They started back, I think, in October, where Mercury and Mars met up in Scorpio. Then Mercury retrograded in Sagittarius, and they met up in Sag. Then they met up again in Capricorn when it went direct. And now it's getting ready to retrograde back into it's got two more periods, and then we're going to get out at least these series of conjunctions that have been happening, these fusions of energy that have been happening with Mars and Mercury. Now, on a base level, it's happened at 10 degrees and 2 minutes of Pisces. And Mercury Mars, what I like about this in this instance is that Jupiter is now freshly direct. It's able to manage what's going on in its house. there's because there's been a lot of that. This back and forth. Mars Mercury can be contentious, combative, can be tactful, clever, cunning. I think can be a word that can come up with there, especially in water. This is not just like a Pisces thing. This is I think a water energy thing that it knows how to navigate the feelings. Water signs are watching, despite I think that they get a lot of this just as basis of that water signs are just emotional. Water signs are sensitive and they feel out what's going on there. They really observe the surroundings and can get a real feel for that when one especially is really kind of in tune with oneself and you can really just tell from just how people carry themselves, their facial expressions, all of that. It's not always just like a big mysterious secret, but there is a way that I think Mars and Mercury can be calculated like that, and that's something that I would pay attention to just sort of general manipulations that can happen against that impressionability that can happen. I think when we're dealing with that sort of like Pisces energy or just water energy in general, and then there's that murkiness with Mercury being retrograde. So that's just some things to tune into there, but I think this can be an invitation too to see where Mercury, it's tricky with Mercury since it can play either sides when it's down to kick it when the malefics are wanting to whip up a bit of trouble. It's down to bring in the goodness and say all the nice things, the sweet things, to take all the actions when the benefics are involved. And I think this can be one to see how, again, not just how people's words influence in a negative way, but how it can also influence in a positive way. How you can have those spirited conversations that just leave you feeling good, that connecting maybe with like an old friend or someone that it could be someone you just met, and there could just be this camaraderie there, this kinship that maybe can come up that can be potentially show up there. I think there's powers in the words to invoke to bring a sense of remembrance maybe for someone, or this great storytelling. I pictured this combination that could be this really creates this just elaborate this tale, this whimsical venture of the hero or whatever that happens to look like. So I think there can be some good things with this one as well, but that's just something to tune into when we're dealing with this. And again, we got one more that's not quite as sweet. That so I think we should, yeah, definitely take this sweetness here and have more a better understanding of how we react even when the emotions are stirred. That could even be something that shows up there. So yeah, something to think about. Now we get to the 18th. This is another little nice one here. We got Venus that's going to be forming a square with Big Papa, and this happened at 15 degrees and 10 minutes. Venus in Aries, Jupiter in Cancer, and this happening exactly completes at about 9:08 a.m. Pacific time. And when you think about this, one thing I like too, or one thing I like about this one, is that you can see both the benefics in the sky after we got to catch Venus a little early there, and that won't be that way for won't be that way for long. They're getting closer together. I'm so excited for that. But when you think about Venus and Jupiter squaring one another, this is still a hard aspect with the square. This is where the celestial bodies are 90 degrees apart here, so they're in like modalities there. If they could the cardinal signs when we think about Aries and Cancer, and where I think that Venus and Jupiter, their intention is to always do good. They're the do-gooders that's what the benefics stand for. But sometimes there's these instances, and you'll see this if you read their various texts. Like I just finished up the anthology not too long ago, and I just started reading the Methesis, which is one of Firmicus Maternus's books. Ben Dykes translated. It's a really good book, and the benefics aren't always benefic. And I think that it just shows up with that square aspect. This could be where, in order to, I like to think of it as part ways of sometimes how we can take things for granted. We all have these areas in our charts natally where Jupiter and Venus are, depending on day versus night chart. I just so happen to have them both in the first house in Leo, and where I see the gifts that I get with just the body, the life force. If I didn't take care of it, none of that would ultimately matter. And so that could be where it's like, oh, I've always had it easy. I could just like eat whatever I wanted and do all these things and whatnots. That's going to catch up to me down the line. The benefics can't only do so much, and sometimes you can only appreciate that goodness when when it's taken away from you. When there's like I've read a lot of the times it leads to this sense of reversals when we're talking with the benefics. I think in hard aspects. And I think that's just something to think about, the things that we may take for granted, whether it be our health, whether it be the fact that maybe you're blessed with finances, maybe you're blessed with siblings, with neighbors, with family, maybe it's with housing, maybe it's with children, with work, with marriage. But I'm just going through the houses here, just going through it. But it's just like, look to see where maybe that is an area where how we take for granted, and how we can find ways to maybe exploit that a bit more, work that in a way that benefits these other areas of life. How do I take this strength into a weaker part of my life in my chart? How can I make that happen there? Because where let's say for example, I have Saturn, and the Saturn's opposing all of my placements, and relationships can be a little tricky sometimes. But it does, if I bring in the work, if I do these things, keep the charisma, keep all of that, it does build some very good long-term relationships for me, some successful ones. And so that can be, but again, it's something that requires work. And that's how that Venus square Jupiter can maybe show up. This could be where we may not see how the blessing is there at the initial front. But this could even be where you may have this realization about that. Let's say we hadn't thought about our finances, and let's say like, oh, you know what, maybe this could be the action, because that's what squares can do, can kind of spur one into action. They were thought to be more kind of martial in nature. So you could see them and think, like, you know what, maybe I want to take my funds here, Venus, all my gifts and things, and create an inheritance, create it to share with others, that Jupiter energy. So that could be even be something that's really, that could be really, really kind of nice there. So nice little pocket there. I think regardless, wherever whenever the benefics are meeting up, we like them when it's trines and sextiles. But even the squares where there may be a little bit more of a challenge can still, I think, lead to some good ultimately. So just something to pay attention to there. Then we get to the 20th, another busy day here. And we get to first starting off here with the sun entering into Aries. And that's going to happen exactly at about 7:45 a.m. Pacific time. And let's go over here, because Aries, you're probably like, what the hell? What took so long, Justin? Well, here it is, Aries. Happy solar return. And this is something where, just a little insert here. If you do have your sun in Aries and you want to book a consultation with me, you get a discount for it being your birthday season. Just send your date, place, and time of birth. Send that to an email with me, and I will send you a code with a discounted price for a consultation with me. So definitely check that out there. But let's go ahead and get into this thing. But get back into this thing because this is always something very interesting when I think about the sun and the moon, especially the sun being in the sign, having its exaltation in the sign of a malefic, and not just any malefic. It'd be one thing if it was like maybe Saturn's, but this is the malefic of Mars, and Mars is technically the malefic contrary to the sun's the chart of the sun, if you happen to have a day chart. So I always found that really fascinating with that, as opposed to how the moon and how it finds its fall. So where it's brought down in the sign of Venus, the benefic, contrary to sect of the sun. And then how it's vice versa for the moon, with the moon exalted in Taurus and then finds its fall in Scorpio. But when you think about just the significator of the sun, It does. There is a lot of sense to that, because the sun is nature's fire. It's that will to be. It's the just the light, the all-seeing sun. And in Aries, the sun can just be, because like I said, it's the excuse me, the cardinal fire sign, and it's active in nature. So that's what I think is really neat about Aries energy, is that it's, especially with the sun here, it's very prolific. I think that Aries, wherever that happens to specialize in, just there's just a natural force behind it, and it doesn't have to do anything extra about it. It just is, and that's cool. That's something that I've had the pleasure to meet some people with their sun in Aries over this past summer, and it's fascinating to watch, just to watch them and to see how they move. And there's it's not necessarily, it doesn't feel like an overbearing force per se. Now, could it be? Sure, we got to depend. It depends on what Mars is doing naturally, but I think in general, there's again that just this will to be, this life giving energy of the sun, this ability to be seen, to be. It's dope. It's dope when you think about that, when the sun's in a good place. And this is the sun loves this. Outside of its home space of Leo, this will be this is the next best place that the sun's like, yes. Yes. About time I got here. Not nothing against Pisces. But it's just like we love this Aries energy for the sun. So it's nice. And this is one too to think about, wherever again you have Aries in your chart. The sun's doing is doing some really good work here for you during that period of time. So the sun is the Aries of a house that's activated for, because if so, it's busy. It's basically got the moon's booking it through here. Venus and Saturn Venus is moving. Venus is moving. Saturn's disappeared now. Saturn's getting ready to get into the heart of the sun, which that's going to be interesting. But one thing I really like about this day too is, at the same time that I have this on the chart here, Mercury is actually going to be stationing direct on the same day, and that's going to happen at about 12:32 p.m. Pacific time, and we love that. Now Mercury is going to, again, one of these statement points that happens when the planet stations direct, but now Mercury's going to start moving again. Those mercurial themes are going to start, okay, now we're going to start making some sense, and now the typical sort of Mercury retrograde themes are going to start easing up again. We're going to start seeing some completion in this Pisces portion of our chart. But I just love all of this movement, because even too, just thinking about, I need to make sure to make that a point, the sun in Aries, that's one of the equinox points. So this is the start of either the spring or the summer or excuse me, spring or the summer, the spring or the fall, depending on what hemisphere you're in. I was just talking with someone on the southern hemisphere, and that's so fascinating to think about. The fact that it was like cold over there, but it's like warm over there. I love that. But it's one of those changing points. There's either about to be more or less light that's going to be happening, and how that adapts for where you're at in the world. And that's another thing too. I think it can be very easy to think about it just from one hemisphere to another, depending on where you're at. And it is understanding that this does mean something different for everybody. So even if it's not just talking about on an astrological level, even just thinking from an astronomical level, someone's getting more light and someone's getting less light. And so that's something that even I think in itself can be, it's a sobering thought, I think. And this is something too, this is where Mercury's about as far from the sun as it can be. So this is a really great time for, oh, this is perfect. This is actually perfect. Hopefully it's clearer now where I'm at. But this would be a great time where you can see Mercury rising at this period of time here. So that's something I didn't think, that I hadn't thought to had mentioned. Mercury's making its rise. So another little astronomical thing. I'm gonna catch Mercury this time. That's the only one. That's the only one I haven't seen. So, but yeah, that's something to, just another little sidebar there to think about there on the 20. But yeah, I ultimately kind of like this, just that I just with all the motion, the changes that are happening, but it is kind of a mixed bag here. But before we get to that, on the 21st of March, we have Mars that's going to form a trine with Big Papa, and that's going to happen at about 15 degrees and 16 minutes. Mars in Pisces, Jupiter in Cancer. And again, when we think about the trine, that's the easiest aspects here. And to me, this gives we see Mars' shenanigans, but Jupiter's bringing more ease to it. It's one of those things where it's not just Mars, in theory, getting just its way. It's having those tools, it's having the help to get through those martial things, to make those things not feel as heavy, maybe as they've maybe felt when Mars was maybe going through Capricorn or going through Aquarius. And so this is not bad for if we're gonna have to have some sort of aspect with the malefics. A trine is nice. One of the easier aspects is nice. The trine or the sextile, it just kind of softens things up a bit. And when you think about that relationship with Mars and Jupiter, that Mars is just a significator of Mars is about the acts of betrayal, the one that doesn't hold its promises, whereas Jupiter is about the idea of trust, injustice, in the where Mars wants lies and deception. And so there could be where Mars again can't get away with those things as easily. There's more accountability that's needing to be had with that Mars trine Jupiter that's ultimately leading to some sense of justice. I think that can happen with this. That could be one thing that comes up there that's been building up. That at least that I would like to think that's building up there. That's something that Jupiter's, especially now again, that's having it's having this direct or being direct now, is able to more counteract some of those martial things that maybe have been kind of coming up there. So this could be where like if something was taken with by Mars, Jupiter's bringing that back in. And something to maybe think about, it may not be, let's say the thing that was taken, maybe not something that is something that can maybe necessarily be replaced, but the substitute is not a bad consolation prize. So that might be the it was like I was talking with a friend about this, where they were talking about an heirloom that their grandma left behind, and it's like, where of course it doesn't replace the fact that you always want them here, but at least you have something to keep their memory grounded in your everyday. And so that can be something I think a Mars Jupiter trine can bring, and can bring some, leaves again a little bit of ease. And this can be very motivational too. I think something where Mars is brings forth again that action and that drive. So this could be wanting to bring more Jupiterian themes in the world, take more initiatives for that, doing some sense of volunteering, doing something where you're some kind of community work. I think could be a nice thing, something that brings people together. Anything along those lines, bringing a celebration, maybe someone who's getting ready to have a child, and something to celebrate the things of life, throw a little celebration for them or something like that, or know someone who's got some good news, and trying to really champion that, to be the one that warriors of faith. I think with that, something that faith in something better, something brighter, something where we lead with love with that. So that may be the all the water energy talking, but one key, I think it's something nice to just to entertain. So then we get serious again. So let's get to the 25th of March, because then we have the Sun conjunct Saturn. And that's going to happen at about 4 degrees and 43 minutes of Aries here. I have the chart is happening at about 1:55 a.m. Pacific time. And when you think about Sun Saturn sort of things, this to me, especially in Aries, Saturn can deal with things that are restrictive, where we want to go in Aries, but Saturn's like, no, you got to take your time with that. We got to have you can't just go and start 100 things. You got to start. Let's finish one thing first, and then let's go to the next thing. And then there's steps that need to be done. There's red tape. There's all this stuff. And Saturn Sun can be a test of the will. It can be this, in order to get to this solar place, this state of exaltation, and not to just get there, but to keep it. That requires time and discipline and patience and all those things that Saturn brings. It's not to say that there are going to be times where we don't feel motivated, and there are times, and sometimes we need those things of rest. And I think it's understanding one's limits with the Sun conjunct Saturn, and seeing those authorities and things that may hinder one, in a sense, that how do the people around you motivate you? How do they bring out your best light? I think that's something to. There's what's controlling the light, because Saturn's deceitful. Saturn's in just as I think just the basic significators of Saturn. Saturn is one that is about saying one thing, meaning another, not being able to read Saturn, not sure what one's intentions are. And I think it is understanding how those different things maybe try to hinder that light, try to snuff that light out. When we think about with this conjunction, but it's again, this is another tough aspect here that we're talking a lot of these fusions with the malefics that are happening here, like with Mercury and Mars, Venus and Saturn, now the Sun and Saturn. The Moon just got done with Saturn not a few days ago. So Saturn, I think Saturn too, with it being in the heart of the Sun, I think that this can also be on a constructive note, the things to get a glimpse into the future, to get this sense of, and what I mean by that is having that clear, like, where do I want my life to go? Do I want to be, and what I mean by that could be whatever that means to you. Maybe I want to be a mother. Maybe I want to be an accountant. Maybe I want to be in Puerto Rico. Maybe I want to be I want to have X saved up. I want whatever that is, whatever that will, that dream, the thing that Sun is giving, and you can just see that. You can see through the boundless things of time. Maybe not quite sure how to get it, but knowing that you can get to it if it's something that you can see with the Sun. The luminaries have that real strong representation with sight. And so this could be able to see navigating in the darkness with Saturn being there, and really it's like take it all. It's like, okay, you enter a dark room. I'm going to turn on, you've never been in it before, I'm going to turn on the light for 10 seconds. You take in as much as your surrounding as you can while this orb that's happening here, while within that 1 degree orb that while the Sun, while the planet's in the Sun, and then I'm going to turn that off. And then try to make your way with those tools and get out of this and let's navigate in Aries. So yeah, just something to think about, I think, with the Sun Saturn. This could be new. This could be potentially new sort of restrictions that could possibly be imposed on one, whether it be in your country, it could be in your job. Maybe there's something where hours are being restricted, or maybe there's no time there's all this crazy overtime that's happening, where whatever happens to be. Maybe I do think that there can be the potential for that. We're not sure, and not being able to be sure where that's going to lead yet. Because again, now Saturn's under the beams of the Sun, and it'll be out eventually. It won't be in about a couple weeks. Saturn will be visible again. You'll be able to see Saturn. You'll be able to see Saturn rising. at this at a certain point. But yeah, during this period, this is a potentially trickier one. I like that it's because it's so strange too. I think to just kind of point out there just that it's the sun is at its best and Saturn is technically at its worst, at its hardest, with Saturn being in the sign of its fall, where in Aries. So it's like imagine being in a place. It's like you have it's such a strange with all three of them, the Sun, Venus, and Saturn, where it's like inside internally you have all of these things that you want to do. You have this very strong will, that Sun in Aries, that I can do this thing, that I know that I'm meant for this thing. But you're working with people maybe that you don't recognize, that Venus in Aries, that is in this place of it's exile, and where the culture's different, the language is different, the appliances, everything's different, the home layout is different. So I have to navigate with that, and then also too, it's something that I can't rush this thing. Like I'm indefinitely stuck in this situation until I get my bearings, until I get some sort of grounding with it. I have a responsibility to Saturn to make this work. I'm in this space now, so it's a very, I think, kind of complex thing that's building up here. When we really kind of sit with that and think about how these are working in our charts and in our everyday lives. And I think just how hold on one sec. All right, we're back. But yeah, it can be a lot to think about, a lot to kind of navigate. It's Saturn's always bringing in that seriousness as we're going with this, and this is just something to think about. How's this Aries portion of your chart is playing out in your life as these themes kind of come up there for you. Now, the nice thing is that we're ending this month on a positive note here, because then on the 30th of March we have Venus that's going to be entering into its home sign of Taurus. It got the Venus ran sprinted. I ain't never seen Venus move so fast. Sprinted through Aries and just like, I need to get out of there. I need to be in my home. I need to just be able to process. And now we're looking at where, with Venus entering this now, where do we have Taurus in our charts? What does that look like for you? How is this aspecting for you, especially if you have the planets in fixed placements? That's going to be Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, or Aquarius. Venus is going to be more active for you during this period of time, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. This is one of the benefics that we're talking about, and it's benefic in one of the places where it's like at home and can do its best work. You got this in Libra, where Venus does great in. So this is especially for like night charts. But see how Venus is doing, and this is it. Just and again, see where Venus is. This could be where, like, if you have like a Gemini rising here, for example, Venus is coming through your 12th house. So maybe this is spending a little more time alone, doing some sort of self-care things, taking care of oneself, or maybe looking into taking trips at a foreign land, because that's one thing that one of a sort of ancient or Hellenistic term that the 12th house could lead into. This could be even maybe bringing in some harmony with, like, the 12th house could deal with enemies. So this could be maybe even helping to turn what once was someone that maybe didn't think you could get along with actually turns out to be really great. And it just, like, as you get to talk, I remember. I remember that happening once. I was working at a place, and it was me and this one person, and I was just like, oh, we're with each other the whole day. Like, how is this even gonna? We couldn't be. We're like oil and water. Couldn't be any different. It was a good time. It was a surprisingly good time. We actually had more to talk about, and sometimes it's those differences that you don't expect that creates these sort of bonds here. So that's just one example of how that could potentially come up. Venus could be going through your first house. If you got a Taurus rising, it'd be some great time. Oh, treat yourself. Take care of your body. Do all those things. Find some sort of, like, make I've been making some skincare things. Do that. That'd be a great way for Venus in the first house. Maybe something with the Venus if it's into your second. Something with, like, your money. This could be something with, like, siblings. Maybe something in the home. Something with kids, work, relationships, travel, occupation, whatever that's looking like. But this is a dope way for Venus to kind of wrap things up for us, to kind of help the benefics again now are in this really good place again, where you got Venus, or yeah, you got Venus in its home sign here, and you got Jupiter that's direct in its place of exaltation. So that's nice. Venus is actually two, not now is not being witnessed or viewed by Saturn's an aversion to Saturn, so that's even kind of nice as Venus is able to do its work there. Eventually, Mars will move into there, and Venus will be able to just be just kind of malefic free. What to like about probably like maybe halfway through Venus's trek through Taurus. But it's nice. This is a nice thing to kind of end on here. Let me go ahead and switch over here. But yeah, this is a nice thing to end on for sure with Venus. And when you think about Taurus, it's like I said, it's ruled by Venus. It's the fixed Earth sign. They're one of the nocturnal signs, so more receptive in nature. This is a very grounded energy. This is a very friendly energy. You know, I think that that Libra can get a lot of that social aspect, of course, because they're an air sign. But you can see that in the Taurian energy too, that can build those friendships and those lasting friendships with that fixed energy, one that can create this. I find Venus in Taurus a very tactile sign. I think that it can build a lot. I think that Venus can really flourish here. I mean, you even think about Venus dealing with like finances and markets and things. That could be really positive time for something along those lines, maybe. So especially if you got Venus in like one of the money houses, like the second or the eighth house there, that'd be something to think about. But we like Venus in Taurus. Venus can be steady here. It can be it's we can take our, even though Venus is moving fast, we can take our time here and really just kind of enjoy the earthly pleasures. Right? Then that can be from good food to good conversation to good weather to good whatever that happens to be, just to good moments, to just moments of whatever that happens to be. You know, find those times of get out in nature as one can, as the weather permits, and go experience those things. I think that could be really a really lovely way to wrap up what was as you would see is a very busy month. I had a lot to had a lot to talk about on this one here. So but this is one where it doesn't have to be super overwhelming. Again, always remember just when we're just staying grounded in this, to see where you and to make the most sense of it, to see where this is transiting for you personally. And then when we're thinking about that in other people's lives, it's just like, oh, this may not be so harmonious for them as this is for me. It creates this different sense of connection, and sometimes you can even see where you have a lot of commonalities too that can potentially happen there. So just a kind of nice thing I think to think about as one is either beginning to learn astrology, and then just as you could continue to familiarize yourself with your chart and to understand the cycles of you and how your surroundings affect your trajectory and things along those lines. So but yeah, that's March in a nutshell. And yeah, I think this is gonna be, I think it's gonna be a doozy seems like a strong word, but it's definitely going to be something. I think just with those hardest aspects are going to be the ones that happen with the malefics when we're going back to the. I'm trying to pull up the calendar real quick. Yeah, the aspects with the malefics on the 8th, the 15th, and the 25th, and it's the times that are building up to that, where when it's coming to exact. That's something to remember as well when I'm talking about these things. They don't always just happen on the day that they come exact. Those are usually the most potent times of that transit, but it's usually that build up before, once they get into that usually about that 3, when it's by sign for sure, but then as they get closer to like about a 3-degree orb, that's when you'll see a lot of that stuff kind of taking shape there. So but something to think about. And then those real nice pockets, we like that 10th with Jupiter stationing direct, the 18th, that Venus Jupiter square, and even that I like where was another one? I even like that Mercury Jupiter trine, that Sun Jupiter trine on the 5th, and that one on the 8th. The 8th is like literally a mixed bag. If I like as mixed of a bag as I can get. And then like that 21st, I even like that Mars trine Jupiter. That one I don't even think is too bad. And then of course Venus entering on the 30th. So helping to kick off April with at least Venus in both the benefics in a strong place there. So because I think we'll need that for April. But If you have any questions about this, if you want to see how this is showing up in your chart, down in the description box, there's a link to book a consultation with me. So definitely check that out. If you have any questions, my email's down there as well. Yeah, feel free to reach out to me. And if you want to see how this is, I have a link, like I said, for a tab for the Celestial News Monthly, but I also have one for the Lunar Shenanigans, which is another thing that I do that's more of a weekly episodes that I do on YouTube, where I talk about it from the perspective of the moon and the different aspects that it forms, how to work with each of those transits. And if you want to get more about the lunar eclipse, check that out in the Lunar Shenanigans tab. I talk about that more with duh, because it's the moon. So that's just something there for you. And then my Patreon's down there, and then I also have the series of videos that I have on the channel talking about different planetary placements and different zodiac signs in all the different places, whether it's be in the 5th place of children, the 6th place of work, the 9th place of travel, 10th place of occupation, 11th place of friendship. So if it is based off of wherever that planetary placement is, and how to think about that if you have that natally, and how to navigate that as you're working out those themes and try to get the bigger picture of your chart and how those areas affect you on a regular basis there. So that's also available, separated by playlist there. And yeah, I think that's all I got for you, all the goodies. And yeah, definitely go check out my Patreon. But until next time, stay mindful out there. You keep raising that vibration through the roof. And I will catch you on the next one. Later.